Okay, so I will
I'm
just.
Phil Russell, President of Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome everybody to today's BusinessWorks. We have Holly Davis, and Holly's going to be sharing about how the COVID-19 vaccines, rolling those out, are impacting commerce and business, and discussing some other issues related to human resources. Holly's probably best known in these parts for her charitable work through Holly's Hope, and but her earlier work was as in HR, and she's returning to that. Holly, I'm excited to have you on board and sharing with our Chamber of Commerce members. This is, as we just discussed, going to be recorded. It's going to be placed on our Chamber website. We'll push it out through emails and social media. I know you have a presentation that you're going to show us, and I've shared the controls with you. And then there'll be opportunities for folks who are on the line to go ahead and ask questions. So Holly, I'm going to turn this whole program over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me make sure I can get this going. And you can see it. Are we there?
Yep.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. And thank you, Bill, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm not sure if this will take a full hour or not. And at any time, if you folks want to just jump in and talk about whatever's on this slide, let me know. And or if I'm going over stuff that you guys already know and it's not of any real value, I'm not sure where everybody is in their life cycle of the business. If you folks are starting, or you're in the mature stage and maybe you know a lot of this or you don't. So anyway, just jump in and I will be happy to answer any questions. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, Bill just mentioned I'm Holly Davis, and I'm the owner of HR Innovations. I've been in the business HR for about 20 years. I took the perfect time to decide to start a business, and that was 2 weeks before COVID hit. So I quit my very stable, loving job, loved it. I quit it and thought, you know what, I'm going to go out on my own, because I'm always helping folks, someone's friend, neighbor, husband. And I thought, this is the time. I've been doing this long enough. And then COVID hit. So it's been an interesting year for me. But I have a master's and just got my senior PHR, which is interesting, which was very difficult, but I'm happy I got it. As Bill mentioned, I have a nonprofit, Holly's Hope, which actually we've ceased to build, stop building, but we're still active with the community. And now I'm looking at legislative changes. So that's what I do on my off time. All right. So the agenda, just want to go over the numbers. I don't know how aware everybody is, keeping up to date on incident rates, death rates, unemployment, vaccinations, and what that means to businesses. And then the big topic everybody asks me about is, how in the world are we supposed to recruit and retain talent during COVID in 2021? And then keeping workers safe. There's some regulations that came out from OSHA that I think folks should know. And also just provide some resources where you can go, especially if you don't have an HR person, where you can go and get the tools and resources you need to continue to keep people safe at work, and then how to handle some HR issues. All right, so this is what the numbers look like. I'm not sure if you guys are up on this, so I won't get too much in the detail, but if you look at the United States, this, by the way, came off the CDC website. So the total cases, you can see US versus North Carolina. Our total deaths are about 8% of our total population. In the US, about 12% total population. So we are lower than the total pop. The vaccinations, I think everybody's heard that it's a slow go. The cases keep going up at a pretty good clip. I was surprised in the last 7 days, the amount of cases in North Carolina. And then you can see in the US. So we're still trending upward. We've yet to see it drop. With the slow go on your vaccinations, if you look at the numbers, it looks like 2021, we're going to be dealing with the same stuff that we're dealing with now. I know a lot of my friends are like, in a couple of months when things get better, I'll start dating again. Well, good luck. So it's not going to happen. And then unemployment rates. We are just trailing the national average in North Carolina. So all of this combined, what does it mean for us? Well, there was a wait and see in 2020. If you guys remember, businesses were kind of saying, we're going to sit back, we're going to do a wait and see what happens with this thing. We're still going to plan our compensation for 2021. We're still going to put the plans in place that we think we'll be able to execute on once this thing calms down. Well, as we know, 2021 isn't going to be much different than 2020. In fact, it's going to be probably more difficult. So the challenges are still going to continue to be identifying, retaining top talent, and maintaining a safe workplace in the new norm. So with recruiting and strategy, recruiting and retention, there's not a huge amount has changed in the way you approach your recruitment strategy, but there's some different considerations you have to take. But I just wanted to go over very quickly what a recruiting strategy may look like for you, and if you haven't put one together, just sort of the elements of a recruiting strategy. I'm just going to move. Sorry, little screen's right there. By the way, I don't want to go into too much detail. Do folks out there have a recruiting strategy? How you go and identify your talent and recruit them and bring them on board? Anyone? No? Okay. So the elements of a recruiting strategy, right? We always want to assess what talent is out there, what labor force is available, understand what the barriers are. Like right now, the unemployment rate, right? You have more access. There's more people out there. When the employment rate was 3%, it was very difficult to find people. So you had to get a little more creative. What does your labor force look like if you're a highly competitive market and there's a shortage of skilled workers? Last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, engineers were extremely difficult to find, highly skilled engineers. So that would drive a lot of your recruiting strategy around compensation, where you located them and how you identified them, which agencies you work with, et cetera. You're going to definitely want to understand your competition, right? So you do a lot of benchmarking. So what's their comp and their benefit packages? You look at businesses in your industry, like industries, location, same type of product, et cetera. What are the working conditions? What are their culture? So you want to assess what you need, who's available to fill that, and then what are you competing with? Also, you put together, your EVP, what makes you the employer of choice, right? So you have to think long-term. Now with COVID, it's what is the vision for the future for your business? So your employee value proposition has definitely changed with COVID. You want to identify effective recruiting sources. Not much change there with COVID. They're still all available. You have your job boards, your professional associations, et cetera. But it's what you put out there that has changed, what your job descriptions, how you sell your company, things like that have changed. You assess what's working, what's not, and you make adjustments. And then you develop the onboard experience that reaffirms why those candidates joined you. So this is just your typical recruiting strategy. That's what it looks like. So, oops. With COVID, I want to just talk about some specific pieces of that. Pre-COVID, I mentioned the unemployment rate was around 3%. The economy was stable, and the comp and benefit packages of your competitors were typically remain consistent, and there were no real outliers, right? And the data we were using, you'd look at a 3% increase year over year. There was no, major changes. Now, with an unemployment rate of 3%, like I said, finding the talent was extremely challenging. Compensation was important, benefits were important. But like I said, there were no real outliers. So if you worked at a manufacturing plant in Morrisville and you're around 5 other manufacturing plants, one of them was not paying, $20 an hour and the rest of us were paying 10. One of them did not have a benefits plan that paid for, the Mercedes of benefits plan, no deductibles or anything like that. Everybody was still in alignment. Even though you were competitive, a competitive market, there were things that you would do, simple things. And also what sold you was your culture, things like that. Now with COVID, so you've got your unemployment rate at 6.2%. That means there's a lot of bodies out there, right? There's a lot of people available. And if you look on job boards, there are so many jobs being posted day after day after day. And actually, I go in on LinkedIn on a regular basis and I look at the amount of applicants per job. There are jobs where on LinkedIn alone, there are 200 applicants within a week period. So they're out there and they are available. I guess it's just how we're going to get them. We've got election year, which has been an unusual one. And it's really caused a lot of, I guess, division actually in the country, and that's caused more stress on businesses and candidates, folks out there looking for jobs, economic instability, and there's just a lot of fear. Businesses are now managing in uncertain times. So where will the people work? So I'm going to hire you, but where do you work? Do you work at home? Do you work in the office? How is the work going to get done that I've had to reduce, especially small businesses who depended on the PPP program? They had to have employees working, but what were they doing and how were they getting it done? And will there be enough work? Ultimately, businesses need to rethink their pay practices because you have these elements now of post-COVID that you didn't have before. So you have to be creative. You have to think about, number one, are incentives no longer needed? For example, if my pay strategy says part of your overall comp is you get a car allowance, or there's an incentive plan, or I reimburse you for your cell phone. Do you have to rethink that now for your remote workers or the workers who are doing a flex schedule? Some are at homes at some days, some are in the workplace. Do they need to reimburse cell phones any longer? Do they need car allowances? Do you now need to pay for things for their home office? Right? So is that something you now say, okay, this is a perk. We're going to pay for a portion of your internet. We're going to pay for your office supplies. So you have to start looking at the incentives, bonus plans, car allowances, the base pay. Do you need to reevaluate your basic base pay based on what's happening in the market? Because it is so unstable. Are there businesses, I'll just take manufacturing, that are now scrambling for the heads, the labor? Are they now starting to raise their salary levels? And or are businesses having to slash their benefit programs, slash any perks, any reward and recognition type HR programs to survive? So there is such a flux now in what could potentially be happening from business to business, industry to industry. That has to become part of your pay strategy when you look at recruiting. Because although pay is not the number one factor when recruiting, it's a pretty important one, and especially now. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Anybody looking at their pay, how they're structuring?
Holly, this is Dan Boone. I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm looking and wanted to sit in on this was this portion of your presentation of how do we keep the police officers in Huntersville that we do have now. And if we bring somebody in from the outside with 10 years experience and pay him what he was making at another agency, that just hurts the morale of everybody that's been there about the same amount of time that's making less than he is. And it's a real issue for the towns of trying to find the correct police officers to fill our needs. Any suggestions?
Yeah, well, my first suggestion would be to look at the current pay structure you have now. Is there any opportunity to readjust based on market, or is that something that is mandated and you have no option to go out, do any market research and make any adjustments based on that?
We're pretty competitive with all the other law enforcement agencies in this area. It's just that it costs us about $100,000 to train an officer and put them out on the road with no experience. And that's with about $42,000 base pay. To bring somebody in from the outside from another agency that has 6 or 7 years experience and pay him $52,000 and of all the allowances that go with that job, there's a friction of, well, he's been here less than I have and he's making more than I am. How do you get over that? It's city government at its best.
Yeah, but this happens in private industry also. I mean, it happens quite a bit when you recruit someone from the outside. They typically come in and they do make more in a lot of cases. I mean, from an HR standpoint, you look at internal equity, and if you don't have issues there, then what you're dealing with is educating the workforce on why this happens and how it happens. There is a reality to business, and there's a reality to the cost, right? I'm not sure why they know, by the way, what other people are making. I'm curious. How does an officer know what the other officer's making?
Because they talk to each other.
Oh.
So, all right, I'll let you continue with your program. I just want to.
Well, no, because I mean, it's a good question, and there's no one answer. I mean, I don't know if there's any real thing you can do other than address that behavior, right? And that's done through education. Because you can't not pay someone to bring them on if that's the only way you're going to recruit them. And if there is no internal equity and you guys are paying at fair market value, then I don't know what other options you have other than when they get in-house, do they have the same opportunities to receive increases, or do they stay at that level that they were hired at until for a longer period of time? So if you know, in the first year you get an increase of $10, whatever it may be, and that person is already above what that threshold would be, do they then have to wait longer to receive an increase?
What you're talking about are the two different types of pay system in law enforcement: bands and steps.
Yeah.
And there's a big argument of which one is better, whether you have a step program or bands, and then you have a lot of compression of again, people making more than others and they've been here less than I have. So yeah. It's an issue that we work with every day in Huntersville. So,
so
I'll let you continue. Sorry.
Right. You have bands, not steps, is what you're saying. You have bands, not steps, is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. I wish I had a better answer for you. I do.
Okay.
Okay. So, anybody else have any questions or thoughts? Okay. So basically what we're saying here is that you just need to rethink what the pay strategies are going to be to attract the talent you're looking for. And there may be industries where there doesn't need to be any adjustments, but most cases people need to reevaluate this because of the instability and the unemployment rate. There we go. So once you take a look at that and you start thinking about your comp structure, right, your pay strategies, you then have to look at, have the jobs changed? And if so, how? Because that's really important when you start looking at your recruiting. If we're going to go find the talent, we have to make sure that we know exactly what we are recruiting for. And if there are changes in those jobs, then we need to make sure that that is very clear, and that we are identifying folks who have the skill sets to then fill those jobs. So are they working remotely, or is there a flexible schedule? Will this person be required to use new technology? This is one that is a sticking point for a lot of folks, that they're not incorporating into their job descriptions or their postings. So there are folks, and we've talked about it, or I guess I've talked about it on multiple Zoom calls. There are people who just don't know how to use the technology, don't have available, or are not comfortable with it. So this is another consideration. And around that, do you then need to provide some training? How does working remotely versus an in-office change and desired competencies? So the competency required to work from home is different in some cases than in an office. Just like Dan, I'm sure the competencies to work, in the officers out in the street is different possibly than the folks who sit in the office taking calls. So if that, right? So we don't want to overlook that change, because you could have the best recruiting strategy possible, but if you're not recruiting for the right competencies, then you will spend money and and waste valuable time. Has there been a change to the core function of the job? Is there a change in clients, products? So what they were hired to do initially in that role, has there been a change to it, and does it need to be identified, right? So a lot of changes around sales, outside sales, companies who've had to, reduce the workforce, they've lost clients, they've had to have had to very quickly adjust to that, and there may be a change in their core business as a result. Has there been any changes in hours, physical demands, amount of travel required? So these are important things to think about when you're putting together your job description, which is then your posting, right? So you want to go through and update your job descriptions and make sure you've included these. It does take time. And a lot of companies, a lot of businesses prefer to skip a real analysis of a position, because it does take time. And a lot of times they're thinking, I don't know how to write this. What is it that they really do? But it is the foundation of a good recruiting effort. You have to establish what are your skills and experience that are required, and take into account, like we said, these changes. Competencies, that is a lot of times those are overlooked. Environmental factors. So if you had folks who are working in an environment, an office environment where they, had to sit, stand, whatever the physical requirements are. If now they're in a different environment based on the change in your business, you need to make sure that that is clearly defined and spelled out. And then are the leadership responsibilities, have those changed? And then the technology. The technology is now key. What technology are we required to use? How and when are they going to use it, and what skill sets do they need? And if they don't have it, if you can't find folks out there who have the technology, right, then how are you going to address that? What's going to be the training? When you're recruiting, will you look for, and I highly recommend looking for people who have skill sets that transferable skill sets, because there are going to be positions where folks had never had to use Zoom. They never did video conferencing. And so if you're going to have to train them, you don't want to eliminate a good candidate if they don't have that skill set look for the transferable skills and or provide some really good training. And then secondly, recruiting sources. So there are a lot of recruiting sources out there. In fact, it's almost overwhelming, really. So based on this job now, you really need to define and target the ideal population with the right recruiting sources. So if you have upgraded a role or a role has been reduced, the recruiting source you use may not be the right one. LinkedIn is fantastic, but it's not the right one for all jobs. You know, it's a professional network. It does require a different skill set when you are recruiting, because there's so much opportunity to do the passive recruiting. So LinkedIn may not be the right job or recruiting source for you. And then there's the Indeed, ZipRecruiters, and Monsters. With an unemployment rate of 6.2%, you are going to be inundated with applicants almost invariably. And that's also why the posting, which is really your job description, it's dressed up a little more pretty, is so important, that is focused, that it is targeted, that you know exactly what you're looking for. And there's not a lot of gray in it, or you don't have skills listed that actually are no longer required or no longer as important, right? So if you're going to utilize those job boards, then certainly define the job very, very much more clearly and specific to the new job or new requirements of the job. You may use recruiters or staffing agencies. Once again, the cost of that is going to vary, and they are going to have definitely some candidates for you, but you're going to pay for it. And then you have professional associations and college recruiting. The college recruiting, I think, is going to become very valuable, because those folks coming out of college are not going to be able to jump into some of those larger roles with COVID. And so they are probably a good population to start recruiting from. Any questions? Okay. I really can't stress the job description more. It's really, really key. Okay, so the interviews have gone viral. Are all of you living on Zoom? like I am. For businesses, it's time to leverage your technology. And it doesn't have to be expensive. If you have the software already, you're ahead of the game. But if you have to go out and find the software, it just does not have to be expensive. You know, we've got Zoom, and if Zoom isn't working, I mean, I've had Zoom not work for meetings, just pick up your iPhone and FaceTime. A lot of businesses are now using texting. So you may identify candidates through a job board, and instead of doing the phone calls and even on the Zoom, they are texting now. You've got your chat bots and your artificial intelligence. Are you folks familiar with that type of recruiting? Maybe not.
I haven't seen the AI stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing what's happening now. So the software available for recruiting. So you log in and it asks you questions, you answer the questions, and then it evaluates your answers. So it's very, very basic pre-screening, but it is available now. So, so it takes out the need for someone to pre-screen. So if you are reducing your, especially HR, if you're reducing your recruiting function, this is an alternative, because it does take out that those tasks. And then you have the chat bots, obviously, where you can communicate with them back and forth, but not have to be face to face. It's really remarkable, the AI. They also have, recruiting software now where the candidate, you don't interact with them. The candidate gets 5 questions, they answer it, then you look at the video separately and you assess them from there. So they are not having to come in to do any pre-screening. And then if folks have, and I don't know if you folks have the HCM or HRIS systems. Do you have any software that manages the people piece? Jim, you're the only one talking.
Well, Holly, I want to tell you, my quietness doesn't match my enthusiasm. I'm gathering all this info, and although I don't specifically hire and fire at this time, I'm not in that part of it, but a lot of my clients that I deal with, their 401k plans, I meet with HR directors all the time.
Yeah.
And so I'm soaking it in. So please don't take my quietness as not enthusiasm or jumping into it, but I really enjoy it. I promise you.
No, I meant you're the only one I can see for some reason on the screen, and you're not on mute. So when I was asking if people have like an HCM or an HRS system, I was just saying, Jim, I can see you and you're not on mute. So, but the answer is no. But I think, the advances, COVID is very stressful, and it's been very hard on this country in many, many ways. But the advancement in technology as a result, I can't wait to see what happens in 2021. I think the FaceTimes and the Zooms and all of that are just, I think they will go away. And by 2021, I think there's going to be many more options for folks, because there are businesses now, and I'm sure you guys are familiar, where they're reevaluating, do we need all that office space? We are still productive and we're still growing with people working remotely. And, there was that mentality a long time, I guess it's been like 10 years ago. I remember when Google, they had a lot of remote workers, and they stopped it completely and said that the folks were not being productive. But I think we're seeing there's a different mentality now. People like the work-life balance. People can work at 9 o'clock at night when their kids have gone to bed instead of, 8 to 5, right? So I think the technology is going to help, help with that change in business. And I think it's going to allow businesses to be much more productive in the new way we do business. So I'm interested to see what comes out. But your HCMs and your HRS systems, basically, they just manage your people data. And the majority of them have software available for recruiting. Unfortunately, a lot of businesses, especially small businesses who these systems have been sold in to, are not aware of the capabilities. They are not aware that, or have not been educated that you can do all your recruitment through it, and you do not have to have one-on-one contact with the candidates, all of the candidates, that the system will do the screening for you. It will generate the letters, and it will track your recruiting stats, so you then know how to adjust your recruiting efforts accordingly. So your HCMs and HRS systems are really valuable if, in fact, you know how to use them. And then I talk to clients about, take care of your applicant, take great care of them. There is so much change happening so rapidly, and so many folks are not comfortable or skilled in doing the video online type interviewing. I mean, especially if you're sending them 5 questions and they have to sit in front of a computer and speak to no one but answer the questions, right? So there's a lot of unknowns, and I think it's just difficult for people to get used to and perform. So if you are dealing with an applicant, I always tell my clients, make sure you send them the instructions, the how-to. What happens if they can't log on? What happens if when they're answering these questions, the system goes down? Who are they calling? When are they supposed to log in? What information, what are the numbers and the PIN numbers, et cetera? So when you're doing these viral or online interviews, you really have to think about the applicant, the candidate sitting in their home, right? What do they need? What's going to make them feel comfortable, right? Because if you're trying to recruit the best, right, and there's a lot of competition out there, then you want, from the moment that candidate starts to interact with you, you want them to feel, right, that you are the right employer, that they will be thought of, that they will be cared for. It is important. And then also, you know, there's these drive-through services, right? Because although you can do interviews online or via Zoom, there's still paperwork. There's still things that they need to complete and get to you. And if you do not have the HCMs, you know, the technology that allows that to be done online, then what a lot of businesses are doing is basically a drive-through. I think it's fantastic. So the candidate comes up and they stay in their car with the map. You give them the documents like an I-9, they complete it, come back around and turn it in. So it's an option for completing the different tasks associated with an interview for those who don't have the technology to support it. So you can do the different options, get creative. And then training leadership or yourself on how to do the video, the job interviews. I mean, I think about the managers I worked with for years. If I were to have them do online or online interviewing or Zoom interviewing, I can't even imagine what that would look like. So there, most of them would have no idea how to do it. Things like set the scene, right? Where they're sitting, what they're wearing. Because the candidate is also picking up on all of that that's going on behind you. Do you look professional, right? And then conduct a structured interview. When you are doing your video interviews, your online interviews, conference videos, they still have to be structured. It cannot become a more casual environment. It should still follow a format to ensure that you are actually identifying the right candidate. You still have to ask the questions that you ask in an office, and then test your technology, right? Bill called me early, make sure it worked, thank God. So you wanna make sure the technology works because that will also be important in attracting the right candidates. And then sell the company. These interactions can be uncomfortable. People are not used to it, like we've said, and they might be nervous. The leadership might be nervous trying to make sure that they've got the right clothes on, that they're asking the right questions. But it's still an opportunity to sell the company. That has to be part of this process because your HR folks are not going to be as involved like they were before. And they probably won't be in the room, especially if you're doing virtually. So to ensure that that component is still a part of the recruitment. Any questions? Okay. Okay, retention. I get asked about this all the time. And retention is about communication and leadership. It's fairly simple. With COVID, because you are remote with a lot of folks, or because you're dealing with people in the workplace who are dealing with a lot of stress, there's a lot of mental health issues. it's important. It's as important what you say as how you say it. Empathy. When you say it and you're talking to the employees or candidates, employees, there's a tendency, you know, in some industries, you know, if you're talking to someone face to face, there's people can pick up on cues. It's just a different form of communication. So in the times of COVID, it's important how you are saying what you're saying. If there's any changes in policy, this is a retention issues come around lack of communication when there are changes in the business that is not communicated to the employees, but yet they are held accountable to those changes. So with your remote workforce, right? If there are any changes of any kind, it is critical that there is a consistent mode of communication that informs employees of these changes, policies in business. If they are held to a standard and they don't even know the change and they're not there, then you will have an issue with retention. Scheduling reoccurring meetings, check-ins, be consistent. So most employers have some sort of meeting with their employees. Even though these folks are remote, you need to schedule your regular meetings. You need to check in. You have to ensure that these people still feel connected to you, right? Because it becomes very isolating if you're working from home. And then maintain your employee programs. Still conduct performance reviews, still have one-on-ones, still have all employee meetings, whatever it is that you have as part of your employee experience, make sure that you are continuing that. Don't drop those things that engaged your employees. If you guys had, you know, March Madness competitions, things like that, make sure you're still doing them. Have fun with that. And then there's formal versus informal communication. I think the go-to in this type of environment is, I think things become a little more informal in how things are communicated. So a lot of stuff is just shot out over email, and it's like a quick discussion. You kind of throw out some stuff that's going on in the business in a real informal way. If there are things that need to be communicated about the business, the numbers, a change, anything of importance, it still maintain that formal mode of communication. And then the culture. I don't know about you folks, but the remote workforce, people are enjoying working remotely. People are still productive. Companies are finding value in it. But when I talk to businesses, the one thing that I think is starting to become clear and is starting to become a subject that needs to really be looked at is, how do you maintain the culture of your business, right? People are no longer on site. So how are you making sure that they are working the same way that everybody else is working and upholding the values when they're at home? So when you're communicating with them, you need to be reinforcing what those values are. You need to be reinforcing the things that make up the culture of your business. Because if you have folks all working remotely or they're, flex schedules, if you do not maintain the culture, then it's going to be very hard to drive the business to those goals, right? So that's something to consider for sure. And then I think this is a great opportunity to broaden the employee's scope of responsibility or learn new skills. And when you're talking to the employee, it's okay, here we are in this very difficult time. Where is the opportunity here for you? Let's turn this horrible situation into an opportunity. you are working from home or your job has changed, what type of skills or what type of learning do you think you need to be more successful? That engages the employee, and it really shows that you care and you're thinking about them, and you're thinking about them long-term. Once again, keep employees updated on changes that may affect them. That is critical. And then have some fun. I see people having happy hours on Friday via Zoom. Now that to me is very interesting because I like to talk, but if there's 20 people on a Zoom and they want to talk, but yeah, so people are doing happy hours. They're having company events, you know, like you would do like birthdays, celebrations. Have you guys seen anything that
Yeah. We did our family holidays on Zoom, Christmas and Thanksgiving. It was actually fantastic. Because,
really?
Yeah. It was
Tell me
20
about it.
minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Because just like family, right? You bring all the family in and you go, oh, I remember why I don't want to hang out with you guys all the time. And then they go away, right? So it was like 20 minutes. I didn't have to travel anywhere. They didn't have to travel here. Nobody got mud on anybody's house. It was great.
That's so great. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I saw, I was, you know, part of that happy hour thing, and I don't know, it's a little hard for me to adjust to, but I guess over time it will become normal, really.
Yeah.
So, but it is strange, I don't know, to see people drinking on Zoom. But the good thing is, as an employer, you don't have to worry about people driving home.
Yeah.
Right? So, all right. So those are some of the thoughts around retention. I think really, once again, it's about communication and leadership. The difference is you have to think about what the remote person is dealing with, which is really that they're just not there to just stumble onto a lot of what's happening, to see what's happening. You have to communicate much more what's happening in the business. Oh, constantly do this. Okay, safety. I'll move through this pretty quickly. So this was a headline I saw when I was looking at some OSHA regulations. I'm sure all of you are familiar with OSHA. They enforce the safety regulations and manage any violations of any kind. So what OSHA's done is they have not put in place a regulation specific to COVID per se, but what they are doing is they are saying, as a business, you must ensure that your PPE standards, that you are enforcing those. So if you have a business and someone's not wearing a mask, you have to have them wear their mask, right? If you're dealing with anything where the folks, there's respiratory issues or concerns, they have to be trained properly, and you have to make sure that PPEs are in working order. And then general duty clause, which really it's so broad. It just says employment and place of employment, which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. That just encompasses everything. So with COVID-19, you know, we all know the mask, the washing hands, and the social distancing. It's important that you maintain those standards, because if there is in fact a situation where employee gets COVID-19 and either dies or suffers the severity of the illness, then they could in fact come back and say you did not maintain the safety regulations and you are in violation. And OSHA's taking this very seriously. You also have to report any injuries or illnesses, even if it's COVID related, which becomes very tricky because it's hard to say, yes, they got it in their place of work, but it's something to be aware of. So I had a client where they had 3 people who were infected. They hung out together on a weekend. They all 3 had COVID, and then they came into work. And so the folks sitting in the offices right next to them, if in fact they had, in the next I forget the incubation period, 5 days, and they test positive for COVID, it's pretty darn likely they're going to say, I got it from X at work, right? So you have to ensure that people are wearing their masks, washing their hands, following the standards. There are posters that OSHA puts out that should be posted everywhere in a workplace also. It informs people of their rights under the OSHA regulations, as well as sets expectations for what is required in the form of the PPEs, washing hands, masks, etc. Mental health issues. This is a big concern for folks. We're a little tight on time, right? 5 minutes. I just want you to know that there are valuable tools and resources out there on the CDC website. If you have EAP programs, please make sure people have access to them. And then familiarize yourself with any new extended leaves or emergency leaves. But you can see here, this little poster, this is right off the CDC. But if you have somebody who is suffering from some mental health issues as a result of COVID, honestly, and you don't have an HR function and you don't have benefits, I think the CDC website is really a good place to start because there are a lot of resources out there. And then finally, can you mandate employees get vaccinated? The short answer is yes. But the question is, should you, and what's the cost to the business? It is not recommended. I have not seen any organization saying, yes, go do this. I just put a quote in here. If in fact you mandate that, and or you don't let somebody come to work because they've decided not to get vaccinated, then you're looking at having to find reasonable accommodations. That is very costly. And employees who say, you know, I don't want to do it for religious beliefs, then you are looking at making a reasonable accommodation for them. So the cost of the business is probably going to outweigh any benefit from that. Plus, you know, the stuff I'm reading says right now people are saying, I'm not going to take it, I'm not going to take it. But eventually over time, people will see that the vaccination is for most, it is not going to cause any health issues or have any debilitating side effects, and people will adopt it and start getting vaccinated. Finally, I say embrace it. I think 2021 is going to bring a lot of opportunities to look at how we do business and how we become more resilient, how our leaders become more resilient, and how we become stronger. Just the technology, the way we're doing business now remotely, we're still productive. We're still able to, you know, maintain, well, I don't know, restaurants and stuff, but businesses are still thriving. So I think we can make good out of the bad, actually. Any questions for me?
Well, Holly, you've given us a lot to think about, and
So,
I'll tell you, it really, COVID has really changed a lot. I know a lot of businesses. My brother has only been to his office 2 or 3 times this year. He's been basically working from home. So really has changed how we recruit new talent.
yes, and how you retain them, most certainly. So.
I want to remind everybody that we have a partnership with localjobs.com, and on our website, we have information on a tutorial about how to post jobs. If you're under 50 employees as a chamber member, you can post an unlimited number of job openings on our website. You can just go to our website and look at employment. And then also, if you're someone looking for a job, you can actually post a video that showcases your talent, and that's a great place to seek jobs as well. So 2 opportunities. But Holly, I want to thank you for putting this together today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I went as quickly as possible, so I think we, yep, good, 10:59. Yeah. Yeah, I thank you so much, Bill, for letting me do this. And obviously I'm available to anyone who needs any help.
Okay, well, thank everybody for joining us today, and look forward to the next program. We've got a new member orientation today at 4 o'clock. And then we have a program, Grow with Google, on Thursday that you could join. And then next Thursday, the 28th, we have a program on the new PPP and other incentives for business that is rolling out. All of those you can see on our chamber's website at lakenormanchamber.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you, everyone.